Hello, everyone. I have even another message from Edgar Allan Poe today. And so it looks like we're on a bit of a roll, but sometimes that happens with channeling where you're really wide open to the information that has to flow through. And as many of you know, I go with the flow. Whatever comes in is something that I'll be working on, and almost like a process of introducing the information, different pieces of information at different times that are critical for what's going on. And so it's almost like, a spiritual weave, bringing in one thing and then bringing in something else. And then it becomes a little bit more cohesive. So here's an interesting, very interesting piece of information from Edgar Allan Poe and his communication with Poseidon. I don't think you want to miss this.
Dives and breakers, wind in sail, I will tell you a story about a man-made jail. It all began within the seas. The landmass had jumped energetically, and the laws of the land became mariner rule, and so is the prison that they put in all of you. The legend of ruler was the ruler of the deep. He had all that he could have when men traveled on a ship. He got a hold of their minds and got a hold of their bodies. But when he began to take their souls, this was the greatest of all follies. I will tell you the truth, there is not a man who can win when they travel deep to Maritime they fall, deeper than they began. You wonder about pirates, or those who last long on the sea. They never remain the same, or the same as they should be. If you want to change the world, you must see beyond the political view. It is time for you to recover what Poseidon did to you. The lakes and rivers there, though there is not a salt water in view, still carry the mariner law, because what Oceanus did to you. He made an agreement and connected as a group both Oceanus and Poseidon, and the one who is also known as Triton, from Neptune's pools of loot. Then it all went a step further as their power began to grow. Let us harness them again when the water rain does flow. So in and out of storms, the storms laid captive too. The innocent child dancing in the puddle began a prisoner in view. They harnessed all the water, made us pay a penny or two, to find what we need most by this law that grew and grew. A thirsty man, a thirsty child, a thirsty mother, no longer safe to drink from the plumbing. They kept corrupting our very life force existence. All mammals, creatures, and living things began to belong to Poseidon's wing. He shot down barrels of oil to mix. He sunk the toxic cabins to pollute what would sink. He supported the many minions being willing to pollute, and all the while Neptune continued to loot. They took the many harvests, the souls that could live in their beings. They made them all their prisoners to be in service to the deep. So I stood out on the pier and I looked at what he did. Then I just began to cry because I slept when I could have helped. I began to shout to him that the people belong to the wind. They should be free in all things. It's not only humanity that binds them. We know it is you who have taken from their will. You tricked and deceived them, and gave them the bloody pill. The pill of deceit, the pill where mankind sleeps, the pill of deep accomplishment, where others sacrifice and weep. A multitude of illusions, and now you are barren just as well. The very poison you created in this world is capsizing down in your watery hell. Poseidon said, I am sick, and it is true. I am dead, as you can see. I hold no other promise other than the energy I receive. Many still worship me and thank me for what I did. They will never discover the truth of all what you said. I will blame unseen forces, humans who search both deep and wide. Because it is already law now, they have no one to fight or reprise. I made sure my path is hidden. What foolish humans don't know won't hurt them. They are all under my power now, and if they challenge me, I will threaten to overflow. You see, some few have awakened, and some few have seen the signs. The world that they had loved is not really theirs but mine. They gave it to me willingly, the wicked me, that's true, you see. The others were not awake to see me rob them blind. We covered them with religion, we altered all their truth. I made famous all who told my lies, and made generals of all who never died. You can complain as much as you want, but it will serve you more to join me. I dusted off the dust of his ashen and smoke, and I told them that all of this must be a joke. You are the joker, that's true. You can only convince many of things, but with all of who know the truth, you will be joining Hades in the end. The riverman will take you, the final trip by water. You will not have a son there, nor even a loving daughter. You will deal with all those you violated. You will sing a new song of despair. Don't ask me if I will help you. I really never cared. It is true I took of plants, the indulgences of Neptune. I enjoyed my half-drunken flask, and some medication too. But those days are now over, and I am here to step back in. I will honor my commitment to never let you win. This time will be much different. It will not hurt at all. I will allow the glaciers to melt, then help what souls they may take. But the earth will not suffer what you intended for them all. The children of the future should have a fair chance. That will never happen if you keep cutting them with your lance. Your dirty chalice is of no use to any soul. We want the living water as what is our birthright, as we are told.
Well, as you can see, this was an interesting interaction between Poe and Poseidon. It wasn't very pleasant towards the end. There was an exchange of words. But let's take a look at what actually happened here. It starts off that, if you want to look at Poseidon and his many other aspects, or his connection to Oceanus, which, shows up in history before him, the whole idea of Neptune coming from the planet Neptune, but in fact, in truth, He is not the original Neptunian. He was actually a Titan. And so he has these connections to Hades and so forth. But he was given power over the waters and supposed to be helping humanity, which we see that he fluctuates more toward self-gratification and his own desires and needs, which result in, the whole system becoming somewhat bankrupt. And you see that he integrates everything. He starts off with his rule. It turns into what we know as the Maritime law. And people would say, well, this is, kind of ridiculous. How could that be? Well, spiritually, there has to be some kind of capturing or taking or harnessing or controlling of an element in order for others to come in and reinforce that manifesting in our present reality. So it has to happen off dimension and in other ways. You see that he talks about how the pirates came in and, he started enjoying this interaction with anyone that was on the ocean and any group of people that traveled quite a bit by water, and started to interacting with them, manipulating them, and then started soul capturing. And so you see that a lot of people that have been on water for long periods of time, it seems like they get into all sorts of stuff. Sometimes they're not really sure who they are. I even had a woman contact me once saying that she remembers being in the Navy, and at a point she didn't even know who she was. And she didn't even know. She thought it was the region of the place, the ocean that she was in, and the location or the continent that she was near. And she thought it all had to do with that. And I did my best to work with her, but it was clear that something had been taken from her that we couldn't quite retrieve back. So it's not something that one would play with. And I see now, this is the first time I've seen this information where not only it was the oceans that I thought was bad enough, he was controlling by the oceans, but through Oceanus and made a deal, has been affecting our waters and of course our landmass by bringing in the rule of maritime law, so that everything has to do with being above sea level or around sea level. And so and how our courts are constructed. So then they talk about how he actually started to harness the rain and creating, some type of control system, regarding any time that it rains, probably having more of an influence. Now you think of some of these regions where it rains a lot, and it might be that he is manipulating things each and every time that it rains. And so, which is, I don't know if water was also included, but water is a primary issue on the planet. It's our existence. It's necessary, it's required. And so, I remember talking to an Inuit native who told me, they said, everyone's fighting over oil. He said, but look at the cost of water. He said, we shouldn't have to pay for water. And I thought, well, that was brilliant. Absolutely. Why is it that all of these things have really gotten to a point where none of this is making any sense? The pollution of our water, we're constantly trying to find fresh water, and little by little that's being taken from us as well, and it probably would continue had this conversation not transpired. So you might say, well, who was Poe to challenge him? Poe was a very ancient being who, kind of like Andronicus, who kind of stepped out of his comfort level, started exploring things, got into things he shouldn't have, and then, had to reconcile, make things right. And so in this case, he's trying to make some things right for us, has access to help us, and is doing so. So he steps out into this pier, and he has a conversation with them directly. Now let's take a look at some of the things that he said. He said that you tricked and deceived them and gave them the bloody pill. Now I couldn't help but think about the red pill, blue pill situation in the Matrix. And I wouldn't doubt that that had something to do with the Matrix, but also the contamination of everything that we've been talking about with the Anshar and the blood and everything else. There's a few different things to think about in this conversation. He said the pill of deceit, the pill where mankind sleeps, the pill of deep accomplishment where others sacrifice and weep. And then he talks about the illusions and the barrenness. And Poseidon admits, he says, I'm sick. There's something wrong with me. He says, I know that. He says, I know I'm dead. He said, I held no other promise other than the energy that I received. And he admits that he's taking energy from humanity. And so we go on a little further, and they go back and forth, and so pretty much Poe tells him his destiny. He says, I dusted off the dust of his ashen and smoke, almost referring to him like he's a jinn now, or something like that, no longer really having the energy that he once had. I told him that all of this must be a joke, and then he calls him the Joker. And so then he told him he's going to be joining Hades in the end. The rivermen will take you, and I couldn't help but think of the river Styx or one of those other rivers that bring you into the underworld. And he says, don't ask me, he says, essentially, I don't really care, because at this point, some of the stuff that you've done. He said, it's true, I took of plants. Well, he talks about, this is where he admits that there was a problem in his lifestyle. Something that came up was about the glaciers, and I think that there's energies trapped in the glaciers that are starting to come out. I've had to deal with some of these entities or beings, very likely pre-Adamic, and which is causing this melting and some of the changes that Poseidon has done that's altered. And we could say, well, it's pollution, it's things that humans have done. Yes, of course. But that's as a result of some of the powers that he's had and misused that created a lack of consciousness in humanity. And so this is, how can humanity get back into consciousness if everything around him is fighting against that? If the actual water, the living water, we're a large percentage of our bodies are water, all of everything is influenced by this. And so it's kind of pulling that energy out of our existence, giving people more of an opportunity to assess and see what they're doing and not fall for the agendas to further harm the earth. And I bring up many different reasons why we're having issues. Each one of those reasons we can hold an intention for a shift and a change on the earth. So with the glaciers melting, he says, this time will be much different. It will not hurt at all. I will allow the glaciers to melt them, then help what souls they may take, but the earth will not suffer what you intended for them all. So in other words, even though the glaciers will melt, it won't hurt them as much as you intended it to, whether was trying to create another deluge or something else. So Poe is stepping in, and he's saying the children of the future should have a fair chance. That will never happen if you keep cutting them with your lance. Your dirty chalice is no use to any soul. We want the living water as what is our birthright, as we are told. Now this statement I thought was quite interesting. The reference of a chalice in the living water feels very Christian. And he mentioned something earlier about how, part of the agenda of Poseidon was to get people caught up in religions. And it makes you think, is he referring to like a false Christ type of thing here, saying that the chalice is impure and that the living water is also a reference, saying we want the real thing. We don't want what's false here. And so then Poe said to me in the end, the story ends right there. So this is where it ends. He says, the dirty chalice is of no use to any soul. We want the living water as what is our birthright, as we are told. And so he says that's the end of the story. He said that's enough information, just deliver the message, and I will begin to do my part. So I'm fulfilling and being in agreement for another being that is stepping up to assist us, and I'm grateful for that. And who knows if he has any more messages for me consecutively. And maybe there's another story that I wrote a while back I might share in time called Prescott's Waiting. So anyhow, listen through. I will keep everyone up to date. Thank you.